Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Second session here on track 2, day 1 of Learning and Development Cares. Welcome, everybody. Put your name, where you're located, one fun fact about you in the chat over here on the right. Guys, super excited to introduce our next guest, Kimo Kippen. If I understand, the word Kimo actually means friend in the Polynesian language in Hawaii. Don't know why I know that. But guys, really interesting topic today. How many times we've all been asked for like a portfolio, or can you show me some work that you've done? And you're like, oh, I mean, I could, but I'd be breaking every contract I've had with every client I've ever had. What do I do? And really great. We're going to learn how to deal with that right now.
Cool. Well, aloha and good day. This is Kimo. Much thanks to Batman for making this very energetic introduction, and I so appreciate the chance and the opportunity to be together with you all today. So it's exactly that. We're gonna the topic that we want to discuss in an open forum, and I welcome you to be part of this, and to really, it's the intention here is to make this a brainstorming session in which we're going to discuss that you've worked for an organization, let's say for many years as an instructional designer, creative designer, in the design and development area. You've created lots of great materials, lots of great content, these fabulous, perhaps whatever platform you may use, particularly maybe perhaps Articulate. You've created all these great presentations and these great training sessions, these modules, day long, hours long, and you've created all this. And yet they belong to the organization that you work for. All that content belongs to the organization. And then the question is, so you leave the organization and you want to be able to showcase what it is that you've done. And the question is, how do you do that when it belongs to the organization that you worked for? And so how do you showcase and get credit for all your good work? So the intention of this short session that we're having today is to really just to brainstorm some good ideas, tips, techniques, what you can do as when you're in an organization, and think about this in advance, because we know one day that you may be moving on from that organization, that you can best prepare so that you are getting the credit for all the good work that you've done, and that you can share this and include this as part of your portfolio. So I was hoping that we could open this conversation up. Batman, I know you can perhaps help me to just ensure that we're getting the comments and inviting people to join us so that they can jump in the conversation. So the question here is, what recommendations or suggestions might you have as a way to ensure that you are getting credit for all of the good work that you're doing within your organization once you leave? I'll start out with just one simple one, and that is that with all the work that you're doing, that the idea is that you would start by creating a portfolio. And this is becoming ever more that this notion of resumes are sort of moving to the background. And for the future, there's this notion of this portfolio that one would have. And you would come with a set of products, solutions that you have created that you could share with a potential client or an employer, that you could share with them that would give them a representation, a sampling of some of the great work that you've done, and that you would keep a log of that. So my intention would be is that when you start, or any work that you're doing, you would start noting and creating notations of all that documentation, so that when it comes time to pull this portfolio together, you would already have a preformed list of all the good work that you've done. So what I'm saying, start with the end in mind. And that is, start with collecting and having a way to capture the good work that you've done. Start there. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over. That's just one simple suggestion. I'd love to have you add to the conversation by including what are some of the other tips or techniques that you've done or would do in thinking about being able to showcase all the good work that you've done. Over to some people to participate, and welcome again to the call.
All right, we've got a couple folks saying how important this is and necessary it is. We've got a couple folks who are trying to think of problems or opportunities and how they've solved them. We're waiting for some questions to come through here. Got nothing yet.
Well, I'm seeing lots of good comments like, "Hey, this is a great topic. Getting credit for what you've done. This is right. This is becoming more necessary in in what we do. I have to think about problems or opportunities and how I solve them. Thanks, Rob. Good to see you. Good to hear you. Um, and really, I'm trying to think about the problem. Great tip, Rob. And also, great to be here."
Guys, have anybody experienced anything like this in the past? Oh, here's one.
Yeah.
All right, Kimo. I have a portfolio. Some of the work I chunk out, a few pages, slides, etc., and remove the logo. Is this sufficient?
Yeah, I think that's one great. I've done that as well. I think that's one. De-strip it, if you will, or de-brand it, which is what they're mostly going to be concerned about. Remove the branding, keep the content. I would, and that's what you would show as part of your showcase. What I've also seen people do is, if you were to create sort of a mock-up brand for yourself, and I'm seeing this ever more today, that you would create like a brand for yourself, and instead where the company logo was, your logo goes there, and then people would understand. And when you get asked to show your portfolio, to be, oh, what's that? They're like, oh, I created that. That's some of my personal branding that I'm including here. So right. I love that idea of being able to capture that.
A question / comment would love for you to kind of address and get your thoughts on is, someone shared, I will apply in quotes, my brand, but they're always concerned that this is not technically legal. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, well, it depends what you, I'm not sure technically. You're allowed to brand your content, and it's your, it's your logo, it's your brand, it's your IP. And I think that's what's also important, that is that it clearly has to be your IP. It has to be 100% your IP. That's what you created. If you were doing this in collaboration with another content provider, I would not suggest that. But by creating your own brand, I've certainly created my own logo, and I put my logo in my content that I've created. That is all certainly legal. Another suggestion here. One approach is to focus on the learning architecture, high-level structure first. What do we first? That we do not identify the client. Agreed. So again, you're never going to tip the hand to disclose that is the client that you're working with. Here's another question. I have a portfolio. Some of the work I chunk out a few pages, slides, etc., and remove the logo. Is this sufficient? Again, I would say yes. I also like what you said there, is you're not including necessarily the entire presentation. You're including a snippet of the presentation, just so again they get a sense of the texture of your work. Particularly if this is early in the conversation, again, you want people to see very quickly, to get a sampling of what your experience is. I personally like a portfolio approach only because it's very tangible, it's very real, it demonstrates the quality of the work. I like also including objectives. The learning objectives in your content. I like sharing those slides in particular, because everything is about really setting good learning objectives. And so very quickly, as a client or an employer, I get a sense for, just by reading your objectives, sort of the quality of the work. Are they real objectives? Do they stand the test of being a real objectives? Are they behavioral? That's sort of a look for that I would have. So I would want to see what those objectives for the particular learning session are. I love this. Is it possible to submit your projects to industry awards? Great feedback. And also the work is documented in ways that's shareable publicly. I think that's excellent. So, so, for example, if you were part of a team that won an award, you would certainly include that. So I think your ability to receive awards, get awards, making that part of your portfolio is an excellent idea. So, for example, Training 125, the Association for Talent Development Awards. I was for many years I was part of the best, and taking overall awards for all of the best awards for ATD, the CLO Media Awards for CLO Magazine. Those awards very important, and Training 125 is another one that again, where have you showed up, if you will, to be able to represent the type of work that you've done. Obviously, that would include any publications that you have been included on, any conferences that you've spoken at, any sessions that you've spoken at. Again, you're just trying to put together a portfolio that represents a lot of your good efforts. Here you go. Do you have any, another one, a well-known ATD Awards recipients once used the T&D magazine cover that she was on as one form of ID to the event, and that she forgot her name and badge for. I think that's a great idea. So you could say what the award is, and then have on one side what name, show the award, and then show the magazine. When ATD does their ATD Best Awards, they put that publication out once a year along with the ATD Best Awards. They do interior articles. So, like, for example, I've been published in the ATD magazine when we're winning the ATD Best Award, and that's something that you could showcase along with your portfolio. Again, giving recognition to the type of work that you've been doing. Love that idea. CLO Magazine, the same. Training 125, the same. You may have been a part of I4CP, some of their awards, other organizations that you're part of, your local chapter of ATD, if they're doing any sort of awards. Here's another question. Do you have any suggestions for websites to use to post work to share with prospective employers? I would suggest, again, you could also include LinkedIn, where you may have published something for your work or posted or contributed to a conversation. That could be something, again, representing a portfolio of some of the work that you've done. I think that's certainly a possibility.
We also have some questions in the Q&A section here. So one approach is to focus on the learning architecture, the high-level structures that do not identify the client itself.
Yeah, and I love that idea. So if you're thinking about being able to show sort of the overall architecture of what that particular module or chunk is about, again, without showing the logos, I think that works really well.
Let's see. What conversation do you need to have with the client if you are stripping the information?
I think what's more, again, you could also do what I call, so in interviewing, I always try to use this STAR approach. It's STAR. You may have heard of this before. It's really, what is the situation, the task, the action that you took, and then the result that you got, using metrics that you're able to get. You should have, when interviewing for any opportunity, you should have several stars, which are really examples, real specific practical work examples that demonstrate your ability in addressing a particular question. So in this case, for showing your portfolio, you could actually put a, like, I would call it sort of a summary page that would go on the front end of an example of your work. And you could say, what the title of the session of this module that you prepared, what it was titled, that you could include the major learning objectives, you could include the action or how was it used, and then you could include in the summary what was the result. So you would have one page that sits on top of the content that kind of lists, who the target audience was, for example, and what were a snippet of the learning objectives, what was the action, what was the implementation method, to what scope of audience was it used that you implemented it for, and then what were some of the specific tangible results as a result of implementing that intervention. I think that would be to have a great summary page would be a really good way to capture that. And that would be, again, the first page that you would have, and then being able to illustrate your content. Let's see what else.
Kimo, you mentioned adding your logo because it is your IP. Is it your IP if you were paid by an organization to create that content, even if you're the actual original creator?
Yeah. That gets into a legal fine hair question. The way I'm used to it is most contracts that I sign as I'm an employee of a company is that is their IP, because they were paying you to do that work, and therefore it's their IP. In a similar fashion, when you're doing any work, when you hire a company to do design and development work for you, the company will specify in its contractual relationship with that particular vendor, they'll contract that they own all of that content, and they own all of that IP. So the answer is yes, but that's where we're talking about how do you demonstrate that, give a sampling of the type of work that you've done without disclosing the actual brand that you were working for.
Awesome. Another question. Do you have any suggestions for websites to use to post work and share with prospective employees?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think that's the most, and again, sharing snippets or summaries would be probably, and then if you've created, the other thing I would suggest doing, and it's pretty easy to do, I've done this, and if I can do it, anyone can do it, is to build your own website. And Wix is, for example, a great platform that I've used. It's just templates to be able to build your website. And so you could have content, again, which illustrates your capabilities and some of the specific and projects that you've worked on, or content that you've created, or presentations that you've done, or publications that you've done, boards that you've served on, speeches, the types of work that you do, so that people can get a flavor about you and your brand. And you may say, well, I'm just looking for a job, but again, it's pretty easy to stand that up. But I think that's where I would say sort of the step before that, if you don't want to get into that level of making it by having a website, would be to simply make sure that your LinkedIn profile is very up to date, very current. People look at those all the time. Make sure, and most importantly, that you're telling the truth at all times. Truth is integrity. Integrity is truth. And we don't want multiple forms of forms of shades of gray when it comes to truth. And then, capture all of that there. And again, use that STAR model of, you can illustrate in some of your postings of the work that you've done, what was the situation? What was the task, or what the content you created? What is it you do? And most importantly, what would have been the result? And to share sort of the metrics as illustrative examples of what you've done. In your LinkedIn profile, obviously you don't want to be too long, but you just want to be able to have illustrative examples, again, that people would be then interested to take the next step to engage with you in an exchange. First of all, be it via email or another platform, or then going into actually having a face-to-face conversation, which these days, of course, would be most likely done virtually.
Very awesome. We have about 2 or 3 minutes left before our wellness break, where we will get a really cool opportunity led by Barbara at the Kara Group to do some actual yoga together, which may be one of the first times I've seen this in a conference. What other questions or thoughts do you have that Kimo can kind of help you guide you through on this? He is definitely an expert.
Yeah. The other one here I see is I have a portfolio. Some of the work I chunk out a few pages, slides, etc., and remove the logo. Is this sufficient? I think it's a great recommendation. I would strongly suggest that you put a summary page on front of that. Again, what was thinking of that STAR analogy that I gave you, being able to say what was the purpose of this particular session, what was, you could list some of the examples, objectives, list the target audience, the implementation, the scope, and most importantly, the results. How did this intervention help or help the business, or save the organization time or money. Those are sort of the things that I'm looking for when it comes to actionable and measurable results. I love that. There you go, Star. There it is.
Very awesome.
Yeah, I facilitate a lot of training using companies' fixed materials. How can I demonstrate my skills in facilitation and running a training? That's great. First of all, I would list the types. You don't have to listen to, if you're concerned about, that organization being disclosed, you can list the types of presentations. So I have a very good colleague, for example, that does a ton of compliance work in the oil industry, and he works for many different oil companies, and yet he describes the type of safety training that he provides, leading to a particular type of certification or safety certification, so that they know, and he has all these certifications himself because these are professional certifications, leading up to getting that certification that he does on behalf of an oil company, for example.
Very awesome, guys. That is going to do it for time on this presentation. Thank you so much, Kimo. That was very cool.
Okay, absolutely. Anytime.
All right. We are going to end this session and jump out into our wellness session. Guys, thank you so much for joining. We'll see you soon.
Aloha.